Today's edition of the podcast is brought to you by Coach Me Plus. Coach Me Plus is the leader in athlete management software and a product that I've been lucky enough to be using for a little over a year now. Only rivaled by the impeccable customer service that Kevin and his staff provides, Coach Me Plus's ability to constantly be amoeba-like in their ability to mold and matriculate what you're trying to get across and bring together is absolutely fantastic. Their constant pursuit of better ways and better methods and innovations and progress to their own product is absolutely fantastic. Go over to coachmeplus.com. Check out what they got, guys. It's something that I guarantee you won't be disappointed with. Hello, and welcome to the podcast. Today, guys, we get to sit down and talk with Dr. Teddy Willsey about the connections between physical therapy and strength and conditioning. Teddy has an extensive background in S&C that he took with him to PT school and is now running a practice here in the DMV area and is doing absolutely fantastic stuff. We get into how his journey as a strength coach impacted him and is still impacting him as a PT, lessons he learned in the weight room from his mentors and how that's carried in. We get into talking about providing value to the profession, which is something he's doing fantastically with an awesome Instagram lineup of content and information that he's putting out. And then, we finish out giving, his unique point of view when it comes to return to play and return to training, being able to look through both lenses as a strength coach and a PT. It's really an awesome talk, guys. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Let's get right to it. Doc, thanks for spending some time with us today, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so listen, Teddy, you got a cool story, so how about we start there?
Yeah. So I kind of got my first taste of strength and conditioning with Buddy Morris, and like I was just mentioning, kind of name dropping a little bit there, Buddy and James Smith over at University of Pittsburgh. This was in 2009, and so I interned with them, and then I was like, man, strength and conditioning is what I want to do. But I had this PT route the whole time. And so I kind of broke off the PT thing. I ended up moving back to the DC area, which is where I grew up. And so I did the private industry strength and conditioning thing for years. Then school for PT, and been a PT for 2.5 years now.
That's
so
awesome.
that's about what I was doing. Yeah, and with the private industry stuff, I was working with a lot of high schools, worked with some MMA guys, did some different stuff, and so kind of bounced around and got a taste of a lot of different things. And it's just a tough field to be in from a private industry standpoint. You're bouncing around a lot. I mean, it's tough in all regards. And so that's when I decided I'm going to go back to learn more about rehab.
Yeah. So then let's talk about that voyage, because Buddy and James and Anthony are three high level, interesting people. How did that time and that education impact your schooling when it came to the rehabilitation side of things?
Well, so one of the first times that I really thought, man, this strength and conditioning and rehab, and it's all kind of one thing. And I don't want to date Charlie Weingroff. I don't know when he came out with the T equals R and that sort of idea. But one of my first exposures to it was with Buddy, because Buddy did almost all his guys rehab. And so if a guy was 8 weeks post ACL, he was with Buddy. If a guy was, rehabbing a hamstring thing, he was with Buddy by and large. Yeah, they used the athletic training staff and that sort of thing, but it was, he did a lot of it. And I was just kind of fascinated by it. And I was like, man, how do you know what to do? How do you know what they're ready for? And I didn't know enough to talk about tissue tolerance and all that, but that's really what I was kind of wondering about. And it's just, you kind of have this instinct, about how the body heals, what the timetables are, and then you talk to your athletes, you judge how they're doing, and you go from there. But for me, that was kind of like, man, first I'm in the strength and conditioning, then he's doing the rehab side of it too. I would love to get involved in that. And, instead of just your total knee, total hip replacement from a PT standpoint, working with athletes.
Yeah. Yeah. And Buddy's a wizard, man.
Yeah, he's probably, I've had a lot of mentors and clinical instructors through PT school and stuff, but I would say that, especially because I was young at that point, he probably had the greatest influence, single influence on the trajectory of my career and my understanding of training and the principles and the bigger picture stuff. And, there's so many buddyisms out there. I mean, one of the things he always used to say is the best training program is the one you're not doing. And just kind of understanding the way that works and how the body adapts and how you need to change, but not so much in terms of training stimuli. And I mean, all that stuff plays into rehab too. And that's kind of, those things are where rehab oftentimes falls short. And so you bring that idea, the strength and conditioning mentality into it. And guys like Buddy, who have had such a huge influence on the strength and conditioning world, and it all kind of jives.
Yeah, so what stuff do you keep with you now on the regular when you're, I mean, because there is so much similarity, but there's also so much difference. So
Right.
what do you keep with you on the regular that you learned from your time at Pitt and your time being on your own as a coach?
Yeah. To start, I would say one of the big things is just exercise selection, just basic stuff. Like if you look at a Buddy Morris 2009, 2010 warm up, that's basically a huge rehab prehab section. Rehab prehab, 20-minute piece. And so whether it's hurdle mobility or TKEs or different bridge and single leg bridge variations, dynamic stretching, dynamic warm up, taking your athletes through all the different movements, build up runs, falling starts. Those are all things that I use in here on a daily basis, because what I'm doing rehab in a facility with 3 half racks, collegiate style setup, and 40 yards of turf. And so I'm doing rehab in the strength and conditioning environment and using those things. So first you've got exercise selection. And then from there, the bigger picture thing and the thing that people oftentimes miss out on is the theory of training and the ideas behind it, how you're going to progress over time, how important it is to load. And just from a periodization standpoint, if you have different physical qualities that an athlete needs to possess, how do we build those different things? When do we reach a point of diminishing returns with strength where we need to work on other qualities more? And I see that sometimes with my higher level ACL guys, like a high school point guard I'm working with right now. Guy comes in here, he's reverse lunging 135 pounds barbell, no problem, but he's not comfortable cutting yet. He came to me from another PT. I'm like, dude, your quads are huge. You don't need to be lunging that much right now. Let's build up some other qualities. And so the same idea, whether it's rehab or training, it's about trying to maximize that athlete's efficiency and that athlete's ability to produce, whatever they need to do. And I think that's where the training and the strength and conditioning and the rehab completely overlaps. It's the same thing, really.
No, 100%. And I love that because, the principles and the theories are all the same principles and the theories. It's just a matter of, are you trying to get a knee to bend again, or are you trying to get somebody to, be at their highest level at the specific time?
Yeah, I mean, you've got those physical qualities, and then you talk about knee bending, even taking it back a level. What do they need to improve and get to where they need to go? And so, do they need more range of motion? Do they need more strength? Do they need more kind of stability, motor control, whatever verbiage we want to use there? And it's instead of just kind of blindly throwing exercises at people, it's trying to figure out how can we maximize all of those different pieces, bring them together to create the most optimal result.
Yeah, it's funny, we had a saying on a team I played in way back in the day. I won't even date myself, but it was just do what the game demands. And, doing what the game demands is what we are both doing. Whether the demand is the same or not is a long discussion, but it's determining that demand and doing what the game's required.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's go forward here because you do some pretty cool stuff that I want to talk about. For people who aren't too, because a lot of coaches still don't like these things and they don't look at the gram like they should. But you put some rad stuff out. And I would really like to hear where this idea came from.
So it started with the name, my Instagram handle, Strength Coach Therapy. And at first it was actually hybrid PT, and then I changed it like 2 days later. But I wanted to create um, something that would, from a selfish standpoint, help the younger me. Because I was starting in probably my junior year of undergrad, so 2007 ish, 2006, I got really into T Nation and that whole world. And then from there, it kind of branched out. And so I was, I was on the Cressy and the Brett Contreras email list, and I was reading all the Elite FTS stuff and the blogs. And I was like, man, I want to continue to help the younger me. And how can I do that? What social media are people using right now? And it was Instagram. And then it's Instagram allows me to do these videos. And let's face it, people don't have the same attention spans that they did 10 years ago, even. And so I wrote some 4,000 word blogs and that sort of stuff, and a couple hundred hits, maybe throw it out there on Twitter, etc. But the Instagram thing just overnight, it just took off. And instead of writing these long things, I was writing short little snippets, things that the 20-year-olds will read and take to heart, and hopefully some of them. And even then, I get told I write too much, and even on freaking Instagram, it's like, but from there, it was putting videos as well. And then trying to, like I talked about before, explain how the strength and conditioning ideas and the rehab principles can all kind of go together. And then it got into some more specific rehab stuff. Okay, so you have patellar tendonitis. Here's a 3-part series of how to start, how to end. And, the focus for my stuff, that 3-part series might not be appropriate for a 50-year-old jogger, but it's probably going to be appropriate for one of your basketball players. And so that's been the focus of a lot of my stuff is towards the athlete, towards the active individual. And also at the same time, trying to dispel some of the myths and some of the problems that I see in the PT and the rehab world. So, a lot of times we hear about kind of a cupcake PT environment. One of the things I ask a lot of my athletes if they come to me from another physical therapist is, were you challenged? Did you find it to be something that, like, I'll even ask them straight up, did you find it to be helpful? And sometimes they'll say no. And it's like, okay, well, then what can we do to make this helpful? And so, there's that communication piece. And I try to touch on a lot of different things on my Instagram. But, at the end of the day, it's about exposing people to exercises and interventions and ways to do things.
Yeah, so now these are similar progressions, regressions, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
that you would use in the therapy setting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's absolutely fascinating. And if the people listening don't follow, you need to, because strength coach therapy has got, gosh, I'm looking at it right now, and there's like the first 4 lines are 3, 6, 8, 11 videos, and someone looking excessively uncomfortable in the bottom of a squat with a safety bar on their back. But it's all like stuff that, like, what I love about it is you look at it and it's just like rotator cuff for different things for hip stability with mobility, like things like that. So I guess my question then to follow is, I'm looking at this and it's none of it is like, oh, well, that makes sense to go. Well, okay, I say that, and there's like patella tendon and then jumpers in the air, the two next to each other. But I look at a bunch and they're all over the place. Is this
Yeah.
just like you wake up and you're like, you know what? I think we need to talk about this.
I oftentimes people will message me and ask me to do something, and so I kind of have a running list, and I'll cycle through. At the end of the day, social media is just a big cyclical thing. I could post something that I put up 6 months ago, and probably a new crop of people will see it and appreciate it. And we're not inventing anything new here. The wheel's round. It's always going to be. And so there's nothing new under the sun. I'm just kind of trying to put information out there that I've already put a lot of that stuff out there. There's a lot of different. Sometimes I'll combine exercises differently. So an impingement protocol, and we don't really use protocols for what I do here. It's more individualized, but from an Instagram standpoint, an impingement protocol might be pretty similar to ideas about how to overhead press pain-free. And so I could use similar exercises, but combine them differently as well. So I'll be honest with you, there's some, recycling of content and that sort of thing. And that helps. It's not like I'm sitting here filming in my gym every single day. But I've had some sessions where I come late at night and or when nobody's in the gym and film for a couple of hours and try to get a lot of content together. But it's a lot of it's based on what people are asking me and that sort of thing. And then oftentimes what I see as well. I mean, I had a kind of a streak last spring where I saw a bunch of hamstring pulls and one pretty bad kind of chronic tear. And so I was like, I'm going to do a hamstring series. And I did a 5-part series on that and talked a lot about it because I kept seeing the same problems over and over again when people were coming from other rehab professionals. They weren't being challenged, they weren't being pushed enough, that sort of thing. And so I try to take what a coach or a PT or anybody or a personal trainer, anybody like that can use, and then put my own little twist on it of where I think people sometimes fall short and try to fill in the gaps there as well.
No, and I love it too because I work with a youth team outside of here as well. And, with swimmers, shoulders and whatever, they always have some sort of issue. I think it's probably got something to do with getting up at 4 to jump in a box of water and stare at a black line for 2 hours. But, you know, we look at these things and they always have homework. And I'm sitting here looking at this and I'm just like, this is freaking brilliant because you've got, however many people coming through your door, or like a strength coach can have however many, depending on the school you're at, you're working with anywhere from 15 to 1,500 kids. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, you know what? Man, my ankles have been stiff, or my groin's locked up, or my knees have been bothering me. And like 95% of this stuff you could do at home with no help at all.
Yeah.
And
I'm
that's
making
rad.
myself obsolete, man.
Well, no, because they still got to come to the gym to get pushed and get the real work in. But
Right,
all of
right.
this stuff, like, I think that's genius.
I appreciate it.
Like,
Yeah, and I use that stuff with some of my people. I mean, I'm like, show them, hey, go check this out that I posted. And one neat thing about Instagram that they made now is that you can save videos and put them into files and that sort of stuff. So you could save all of your hamstring posterior chain videos in one folder, all your shoulder stuff in one folder, and you can pull that up. Just send that over the direct message to one of your athletes. They have it in their I mean, it's a tool, it's a machine. It helps to communicate with athletes. It's the language that they speak. And let's face it, these 19, 20-year-olds that we work with, they think it's cool. They're like, oh man, you got this many followers. Like, I mean, it's social currency for them.
mm-hmm.
And for us, it's kind of more of a professional thing. My personal Instagram where I post pictures of, me and my wife and my dogs and what we do outside and that sort of thing. I don't care about that. I have 600 followers there, but it's for the kids. They're like, man, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, and because it is cool. And I think that, like, for us professionally, it's super cool. And it's been successful with the kids, is what you're saying.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I know a
Yeah.
lot of coaches like to use it just to, like, to display for the kids to see, like, oh, well, look at Johnny did this and Sally did that. But, like, for actually teaching them, and this has been really successful for you.
Yeah. And the athletes are not my primary target. My primary target is you, people that want to learn and implement this sort of thing. And the athletes is just like, I think they follow along because they like to take little tidbits. For example, I was talking to a soccer player that I worked with last summer, and she said, she was like, I always skip over the upper body stuff, but I like your knee and ankle stuff, and so there's still little things out there for her. And um, I think that athletes that have trained with strength coaches, like yourself, who are educating them on what they're doing and why they're doing it, and when they get involved in the process, they're going to like seeing some of this stuff. And sometimes our athletes are looking for things to do on their own, and maybe sometimes we don't want them to do too much on their own. But either way, it's there for them. And so I think it helps everybody. And I'm trying to provide value, and I think providing value within your content is how it grows. And then from there, you increase the audience and you can potentially have a greater influence on pushing things in the right direction, whether it is the strength and conditioning field and, the physical therapy field and all of these different places that sometimes need to continue to progress and go in the right place.
Yeah, no, 100%. I do. I think that that's awesome. And I can't thank you enough for putting all that out because it's killer.
Of course, man.
So let's talk about one thing that's really near and dear to my heart, and a part that I think it is because it's so stumping, and it hasn't been out yet. But I just talked with Bill Hartman about it. It'll be the
Hmm.
podcast before this. Um, let's talk about return to play because you're a guy that's in both realms, and there's always that one spot that's even more tricky, and that's that return to train.
Yeah.
Where, as a person that is working on both sides of the aisle, do you see that we can provide a better way of moving from those initial rehabs to being more of our general physical preparation type training?
So it's a good part. It's a good question. There's a lot of different parts to it. I think that one of the most important things we need to look at early on in that return to play is what can we do to train around the injury? We're not going to train through an injury, but if it's an ACL, for example, we'll go back to that. Uh, we might not want to load the knee too much, but they should still be deadlifting. They should still be doing upper body. They should still be doing low impact conditioning, whether you have assault bike, airdyne bike, Versa climber, anything like that. Sled drags, just slow, anything like that to continue to just give the system some sort of cardiovascular stimulus, and then also any sort of strength training stimulus, is going to help immensely in that as we get closer to that return to play. And so I think one of the big problems that we see is the whole idea of being cleared to practice, cleared to train. What happens before then? What was going on last week where they couldn't do anything and now they can be thrown into the mix. And so anytime that we can concurrently train around an injury while rehabbing as well, and that's just hours in the day and what we have available, from a collegiate standpoint, how many hours can we get our athletes in, all that stuff. Any type of stimulus that we can do to train around that injury is going to be huge for returning to play. One of the other things that I see is just a communication problem. Sometimes there's poor communication between how the athlete feels. They might tell one person one thing, somebody else another thing. You need to be able to kind of knife through that, know who you're working with. And then, whether I know all colleges are kind of set up a little bit differently, but whether you've got your surgeon, you've got your PT, you've got your ATC, you've got your strength coach, you've got your sport coach. That's 5 different people that have like a pretty big hand in what's going on. And those people need to be coordinated with each other. I go through that in high school sometimes where I'll hear 2 different things like, oh, she told me X, she told me X. And it's like, I didn't tell her that, and so it's trying to figure out how we can put that all together. And that's kind of the athlete centered care model where there needs to be one specific person. And I take that role as a PT a lot of times. There needs to be one specific person, kind of like a social worker, that's the advocate for the athlete and trying to figure out where are they from all these different pieces? Are they cleared from a surgical standpoint? Does the athletic trainer feel comfortable with them doing this? And, so that communication piece, I think, is huge for return to play, training around the injury and maintaining some of those physical qualities. When do injuries happen? Usually under states of fatigue. So the more that we can just get their system stimulated and moving so that they do not lose all of that conditioning and maximal strength and that sort of, how often do we need to train maximal strength? Not often, but let's just do anything that we can to keep them going in the right direction. And then one of the other things that I see a problem a lot of times in the private industry is this, let's say you're talking about a hamstring pull, hamstring tear. They're in PT, they're running, they're jogging 8 miles an hour, 9 miles an hour on a treadmill. I've seen athletes that after a hamstring pull, they don't sprint for 2 months. They're scared to. But they go out there and jog 6-minute miles, or run 6-minute miles. They're like, oh man, I'm good to go. I'm like, but you are a D1 athlete. You're going to hit 15, 16, maybe 17 miles an hour, but you're only jogging at 10. That injury is not going to happen at 10. So the last part of return to play is we need to push them and we need to expose them to a high amount of stress. The job of a rehab professional is not done when their pain is gone. The job of a rehab professional, and the strength and conditioning can obviously play a role in this as well, but it's to expose them to that stress and create that adaptation so that they are prepared for the demands of their sport. And I just don't see that happen a lot of times. The first time that they really test their hamstring ideally it shouldn't be on the field or on the court. But sometimes we almost get afraid to test it, and we're like, all right, let's just let them go out there. And we don't want to say we're winging it, but that's the reality of what we do sometimes with a high level athlete. And a fast break happens, they're going to test it. Like they're going to, if you let them out there. So
100%.
yeah.
So then how would you recommend, because I could also see that being a psychological issue with the athlete.
Mhm.
How do you, as a practitioner, help, is persuade them the right word, uh, to actually do it? To believe in themselves enough to hit those top velocities.
It's communication. I mean, it's letting them know where they are from the beginning, not bringing them down by any means, but just making sure they know where they are. Because a lot of times with your ACL, they might not be confident when they're ready to go. Whereas with your hamstring, it might be the opposite. They might feel, oh man, I'm good. I was jogging, I ran a 6-minute mile or whatever, but you didn't hit that speed that you're going to hit when something happens on the field or the court and you're going to really open it up. And so it's getting them involved in the training or the rehab program, making sure they know why they're doing things. I talk to them about the bigger picture of stress management. And, we're going to hit this speed once this week, but next week we're going to hit it twice. Third week, we're going to hit it every day, And so I try to talk to them about that the whole time so that they're really bought into the system. But I mean, that comes down to an individual thing too, with managing your athletes from a coaching rehab standpoint, and knowing, is this person going to be overconfident? Do they need a little nudge because they might not be comfortable enough? And I think that's just that communication at the end of the day,
No,
that
100%.
interpersonal relationships. And I mean, that's what it comes down to, whether it's, whether you're coaching, rehabbing, all that stuff.
No, yeah, 100%. And I think that, especially in today's day and age, if you allow them to have a little bit of input with it as well, I think it helps and goes a long way.
Yeah. When I'm bringing hamstring rehabs back, it's always communicating. How'd that feel? How'd you feel the next day? I've had athletes where I have them keep a journal. I had a athlete who was coming back from a stress fracture, and she had surgery on her foot, and I had her keep a pain journal because it was too difficult for her to recall on a daily basis how she felt. But what we did in the pain journal, she also wrote down her practice hours, that sort of thing, because we had to figure out, okay, the changes are incremental. They're small, but you know how stress reactions work. I mean, it's always going to be small incremental changes. Sometimes even just changing a plane surface or footwear can create a stress reaction. And so are we getting better over these 3 weeks? And that's impossible to determine if you just sit there and try to rack your brain. You can't trust your memory with that sort of thing. And so all that communication and keeping track, and I mean, it all plays into their confidence and their readiness to get back on the field and buying into the process.
Yeah, I love that idea too. Having them keeping a journal of it, as long as they're compliant with it. Obviously, it would be
Right.
fantastic. But yeah, I mean, it's the confidence aspect of it is so huge, and I think that there's a few really really good examples of that right there.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, the confidence, like with agility stuff, and one of the things that people like to, on some of the echo chambers of social media, people like to talk about, agility is not cutting off a cone. Agility is connecting your brain to your feet and reacting. The more that you can include that in rehab, all that sort of stuff plays into their confidence. And you'll say to them, you're like, look, you just did that right there. I saw you. You didn't think about your knee once. And they're like, no, I didn't. I'm like, you're on your way, man. You're on your way. Because that's the first step, is just, or not the first step, but really the last step, that unconscious competency, moving without thinking about it. And that's how you develop any sort of skill, and so rehab's the same thing.
oh, no doubt, and it's funny because when you talk about those sort of things, and yeah, I mean, people go probably a little too far when they're talking about like cones and this and that, but like starting with just teaching them how to cut, and then into a stepped out drill into a cone drill and then into something reactive is, people say it's training, but it 100% fits into that same umbrella with
Hmm.
rehabilitation.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
it's,
you're just using the same ideas.
100%, because at the end of the day, like, you're just trying to rebuild what was there
Hmm.
before it broke, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and all of these ideas, they're not really taught in physical therapy school. And so one of the main focuses of my Instagram and my whole push has been to help PTs to understand this and to see, maybe not to understand this, because let's be honest, I'm not going to teach them everything they need to know through Instagram, but to let them know there's more out there, man. A lot of times I see rehab professionals, they fall into this trap where they get out of their school and they're like, man, I just got a doctorate. Like, I'm exhausted. I don't want to go learn stuff that's quote unquote below me. I'm not going to go get a personal trainer certification. I'm not going to go to they don't even consider it really. Like, I'm not going to go to a CVAPS or something like that. Like, I'm not going to go to a strength and conditioning seminar and learn about that stuff, or go intern with a strength coach, because I'm ready to start working. And so, um, you know, the advice I always give to the young PTs and rehab pros, and I know that a lot of them probably aren't listening to this specifically, but it's learn from the coaches, learn from the people who are training and teaching. That's so valuable, especially when you want to work with athletes. At the end of the day, you need to know what their demands are.
100%, and it's kind of like a two-way street that doesn't seem to have a lot of traffic going the other way. Like, I think a lot of strength coaches are like, they get all stoked to learn from physical therapists, but it's I think there's, but then again, a lot of the higher end physical therapists are people that like have worked as strength coaches too.
Right.
So um, I don't know
There's
why that
that's
math
not a
isn't made
that's
with
not a
everyone else.
coincidence.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not a coincidence at all. I think a lot of your higher level PTs, and also they garner the respect a little bit. I think the fact that I've spent some time under a barbell helps me to, let's be honest, strength coaches size people up. I know that industry all too well, and I do the same thing. But I think that the two-way street, and you put it, that was beautifully worded. It's a two-way street, and you need some of the coach or some of the rehab pros going the other way. And that, because those principles and the periodization stuff, like, that's one slide on one PowerPoint presentation in PT school. Like, that's like, we did mention periodization, but that was it.
yeah.
you
Said the
know you're
word.
not Yeah, exactly. You're not sitting in a lecture about it, or reading the book periodization, tutor bump or anything like that. It's just mentioned, and that's it.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
uh, you know, I think it all fits together, and I'd love to see in the future more people combining the two things to better serve our athletes, and not even just athletes, people like ourselves, people in their 30s that just want to lift and train and rehab and stay healthy. You know,
100%.
yeah.
Because eventually, man, we get old and all we can do is like either try to do meets or road races. Because one day you'll be 42 and everything will be hurting as well,
Yeah, yeah,
But listen, Teddy, this is killer, man. I can't thank you enough for spending the time with us today. This is fantastic. And before we go, spit that Instagram one more time for me, man, to make sure everybody
yeah.
follows it.
It's strength coach therapy. It's just
Yes.
all one word: strength coach therapy.
Yeah, man. Killer stuff. Check it out, guys. And dude, thank you so much for the candid
All right,
sharing today,
coach.
brother. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, man. We'll be in touch real soon.
All right.
And a huge thanks to Dr. Teddy Willsey for sitting down and talking with us today. Guys, fantastic stuff. Open, honest, candid sharing as always. Teddy, thank you so much. And please continue putting out the great content. Again, guys, hop on that Instagram. You can find it linked below. He is putting out some killer stuff on the regular. Make sure you're following him. And as always, guys, if you did enjoy the talk, please share it through the social media outlet of your choice: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it may be. We're just trying to get great information out to all the great coaches out there. So if there is something that you like, please pass it on, let people know. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a review on iTunes or Podomatic, we would be greatly appreciative of that too. And as always, guys, thank you so much for everything you do for us here at Central Virginia Sport Performance. We will be back next week with another awesome guest. We will see you then.